New York's most popular nightclub, Vortex, has become a legend that resonates in the most mysterious corners of the city. The rhythm of nightlife was changing rapidly here. A new secret was being revealed at every moment. Sarah, Emily, Chloe, and Jack were looking forward to celebrating tonight after a week of stuck, overwhelmed, and tense work lives. In their eyes, the Vortex was not just a place of entertainment, but also a place of escape. They thought they would find their lost lives again at the end of the night. As they approached the club's doors, an intoxicating wave of uneasiness washed over them. Every beat of her heart shook Sarah's body, but the feeling was a kind of excitement. When they walked through the door, there was a strong smell of tobacco and alcohol in the air. The dark lights of the club seemed to draw them in. Voices echoed intermittently and dazzling colors spread to every corner. While Sarah looked around, Chloe immediately headed to the dance floor. While Chloe's body moved in time with the music, Jack and Emily decided to go around the bar and have a drink. The crowd around them seemed to have turned into a horde of ghosts. As Jack watched the crowd for a moment, a sudden wave of uneasiness rose within him. But after a while, he tried to suppress this feeling and stepped outside to buy a cigarette. The atmosphere inside the club was becoming increasingly heavy. The music was echoing intermittently in his ears. The lights were slowly moving as if trying to catch them and trap them. Taking a deep breath, Jack decided to find his lost friends. With every step, as much as he wanted to forget this night, he felt something grow inside him terribly. Something seemed wrong. As he moved deeper into the club, he noticed the lights starting to dim. With every step, something was creaking under the floor, and the humming sounds coming from the walls were becoming more distinct with each passing second. The crowd was lost, as if lost in a sea. There was so much crowd that it seemed impossible to find anyone at once. He tried to move faster to find his friends as soon as possible. A deep silence came from the dark corners of the club and slowly began to surround him. And suddenly, unexpectedly, a door appeared before his eyes. The gate was quite different from the general atmosphere of the club. It was a thing made of rusty, dirty iron that looked abandoned. Jack started, but curiosity forced him to open the door. He pushed the door and entered. The moment he entered, he felt as if time had stopped. It was like he had stepped into a completely different world from the rest of the club. The air here is foul. The walls are darkened, as if they had not seen light for many years. The yellowed ropes hanging from the ceilings were taut as if they would break at any moment. The fear of that moment and the uncomfortable silence intoxicated Jack's mind. The ground was covered with rusty metal plates, and with every step he took, the terrible echo of the metal rang in his ears. For a moment it was as if this dark corner of the club was a door to another dimension. What he felt around him was like a threat rising from the depths of his subconscious. A deep scream echoed in the background. "Jack, I'm here." He started to move quickly to find the source of the sound. While his heart was beating rapidly, he was also trying to balance his steps. But no matter what, it was impossible to resist the mysterious pull of that voice. Another door appeared on his path. It was a rusty, blackened, old door. He was starting to feel like everything was getting weirder and weirder. After taking a deep breath, he forced the door open. At that moment, he felt something was starting to get worse. When he opened the door, what he saw literally horrified him. On the sides of the long corridors, there were abandoned human figures in dark cells. It was as if they had all been stuck here, in the same fear, for years. Rusty iron bars surrounded each cell. The floor was littered with old dishes that had been abandoned long ago. Rotten dinner plates, rusty cutlery, and garbage. There were traces of lost lives in every cell. A figure moved around a corner. Jack began to approach, trembling. The figure was Chloe. He slowly walked over to her and tried to wake her up. "Chloe, are you here?" Chloe's eyes widened in fear. He could barely raise his head and make his voice heard. "Jack, get out of here. They're here," he said, and paused for a moment. His eyes were trembling as if he were seeing someone who wasn't there. At that moment, a voice echoed from the depths of the club, as if right next to him. Jack, run away! Don't leave here! When Jack was confronted by Chloe's fear, he felt like things were getting much worse. Chloe's eyes were getting bigger with each passing second. Something was echoing deep inside. Not only could he see her, but he felt as if everything around him was filled with darkness. This place had become something of a nightmare. They were being drawn into lives lost in the depths of the club, a place that had forgotten what time and space were. Chloe began to collapse to the ground, shaking. Jack, get out of here. Here. They're here. He mumbled, realizing that something in his eyes held a never-ending fear. There was a difference between here and the rest of the club. This place was like an underground dungeon. That fear hit Jack's body like electricity. There was something here beyond everything. A curse, a cursed area. Screams echoed in his ears. Not only the screams coming from the other rooms of the club, but also the echoes coming from the dark depths of this place. All these sounds were the voices of the souls that were once lost, but were able to return. Of the shadows screaming desperately, Jack resisted fear and decided to find Emily and Sarah. But as he took his steps, he realized that everything was becoming more and more frightening. As we went deeper into the club, each door turned into a bigger trap of fear. This was not just a club, but a place that held the secret of lives that were once alive but were now only lost. A place was a black hole that sucked people in with every step and never let go. Chloe's screams were even louder. "Jack, watch out!" he shouted. But Jack kept moving forward, looking for a glimmer of hope in his eyes. At that moment, another scream arose. But this time, it was almost impossible to find the source of the sound. From the depths of the club, another door opened. The gate showed what was once a safe path had now become a lost and abandoned passage. What was behind the door? There was not a single person who did not wonder about this. When he stepped inside, a strange silence surrounded him. Something was moving, but there was no sound. He took a deep breath and, suppressing the fears in his mind, decided to return to Chloe. When Jack quickly found Chloe, the atmosphere of the club was taken to another level. Now the club had become a place that seemed to carry only the screams of lost and abandoned lives. Every corridor was getting narrower. Every door was hiding another nightmare behind it. When he took another step, hoping to find Emily and Sarah, the intensity of fear almost prevented him from breathing. A kind of echo in his mind spread to every corner, multiplying the tension. For a moment, all the voices inside were silent. Only Emily's scream echoed in the background with deep sadness. "Jack!" "I'm here." But it was almost impossible to tell where the sound was coming from. Jack tried to find the source of the sound with his frightening speed, but every corner became darker, narrower, and more dangerous. A door appeared at the end of the road. That door was like a reflection. Everything seemed like a dream that had to be forgotten as soon as possible. Every door seemed to be a dead end. As Jack, Chloe, Emily, and Sarah descended deeper into the club, they felt like time had stopped, and they were getting more lost with every step they took. Every corner, every passage was closing like a trap. The yellowed lamps hanging on the walls now filled this place, which once sparkled with neon lights, with only dead silence. The club was now like a tomb that sucked them all in. The group, which had not even a shred of hope left in their hands, felt more terrible loneliness with each step. At that moment, the owner of the club appeared as a shadow-like presence. He walked slowly towards them. His face seemed to be covered by a dark mask, away from the lights. There was no expression, just a deep emptiness. It was as if this man's presence united all the dark energy within the club. "What do you want from us?" Jack shouted, as if he wanted to scream, but realized how weak his voice was. The owner of the club replied with a smile. "You are no different now. This is the place of lost lives. There is no time here. Everything here are echoes of souls that have been lost and will continue to be lost. With each step of this rapidly approaching dark figure, there was a change in the air around him. A weight seemed to slowly consume everything. Fear had penetrated everyone's lungs. The emptiness in his eyes was so deep that nothing could come back. And at that moment, a light exploded from the club owner's eyes. That light spread to every corner of the darkness. The whole place suddenly changed. The walls were buckling. The floor was shifting. Everything was turning into a nightmare. "You're stuck here now," said the club owner. "This is your last stop. Nothing can go back here. You will be lost in time." With every step, hope for a way out faded. As the owner of the club approached them in a creepy way, they felt their bodies getting heavier with each step. Dark silhouettes of lost people loomed around them. There was no fear in his eyes, only emptiness and deep silence. Now they were part of the club. Jack and his friends found a door inside the club looking for one last hope. But when they pushed the door, it opened another dark world to them. As the door opened, a deeper void that did not belong to the club was revealed. The club owner and the lost souls appeared behind them. They were approaching them. "You can't escape anything," the club owner said, almost in a whisper. "Everyone gets lost here one day." And in that moment, their entire world went dark. The door closed, and the last light disappeared behind them. They did not understand what time was. Now everything belonging to the club was distorted and darkened like a dream. Jack and his friends could not move. They felt like a weight. They were trapped in deep darkness, and everything resembled the terrible corridors of an underground labyrinth. They tried to extend their hands, but their hands were not touching anything. There was a voice, a whisper around them. But when they heard the voice, they could not understand what it was. There was no truth to anything anymore. Although the club was once known as a fun place among people, now every corner, every wall seemed to bear the cold shadows of lost lives. A figure appeared in the darkness. Jack tried to take a step back in fear, but his body didn't seem to move. That figure was coming from beyond time. Now people were no different than ghosts. Slowly, he held out his hands. His face looked as if it were kneaded with the longing of every dead soul. "There is no escape," the figure said. "We are all souls trapped here, abandoned to eternal decay." And at that moment, something sparkled in his eyes. This figure was a reflection of the club owner. It was just a mask, an illusion. What was real was the club itself and the souls that were lost as everything turned into an endless vortex. There was fear on the faces of Chloe, Emily, and Sarah, but the fear was unlike anything they had ever witnessed before. It was as if every minute, every second, was rotting their bodies and minds. There was no turning back now. This fear had become a part of them. Suddenly everything started shaking. The floor, the walls, the yellowed lights on the ceiling. Everything rotted and began to disintegrate. Fear surrounded them like an explosion. In that moment, each person became something else. Only lost souls, mixed screams. They would never return again. And one last scream echoed in that dark dungeon. No one would ever get out again. No one would ever escape this place again. The club was an endless labyrinth of the lost. Every door was a trap. Every passage was a fatal disappearance. They were trapped forever in a world where time was frozen and everything dissolved and disappeared. Near the railroad tracks, there was an old bar called Foggy Lantern, rumored to be built on the remains of an old cemetery. It was considered one of the most haunted places in America. Many legends surrounded the bar, but no one had ever been able to prove whether the stories were true. People often claimed they felt something strange following them after leaving the place. Journalist Sarah Collins decided to visit the bar to write an article about it. Her piece was for the special issue of the magazine Hidden Secrets, and she was determined to thrill her readers with the story. She arrived at the bar at around 10:30 p.m. The faded neon sign flickered weakly, and a cold breeze seemed to whisper faint voices, almost as if beckoning her inside. When Sarah entered, she was immediately hit by the heavy scent of old whiskey and smoke lingering in the air. A few of the patrons gave her brief glances before returning their focus to their drinks. Her eyes landed on the bar counter, where a middle-aged silent bartender stood, locking eyes with her. He seemed as though he had been expecting her. Sarah took a seat and pulled out her notepad. "What's the strangest thing that's ever happened here?" she asked the bartender. At first he didn't respond, merely pointing toward a door at the back of the bar. "If you stay here long enough, you'll see it for yourself," he said. Sarah tried to jot down his words, but she suddenly noticed the sounds around her shifting. The music playing in the background seemed distorted, as if it came from a place far beyond this world. Toward the back of the bar was a door, one that many locals claimed was always kept locked. As Sarah approached, her breathing grew heavier. The walls were damp, and the air in this part of the bar felt colder than the rest. When she got closer to the door, she heard a low, eerie humming. It almost sounded like someone crying on the other side. But then she realized something even more unsettling. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood a shadowy figure. Sarah turned around, but no one was there. At first, she told herself, "I'm just tired. It's all in my imagination." But deep down, she felt something was following her. She turned her eyes toward the door and, with trembling hands, reached for the handle. As she twisted it, the sound from inside stopped. It was as if something, or someone, was trying to stop her. But her journalistic instincts wouldn't allow her to back away. The door opened. Inside were numerous empty tables, all covered in dust, as though no one had set foot there for decades. However, one table in the middle stood out. It was clean and had an old photograph sitting on it. The photo depicted several people, the bartender, some former patrons, and an eerily familiar face. Sarah was horrified to realize that the last face in the photo looked exactly like her. How could this be possible? She had never been there before, yet the outfit in the photo, the hairstyle, everything matched how she looked at that very moment. This is a prank, she told herself, but then the bar door slowly closed on its own, and a breeze began to swirl through the room. From the depths of the air, a woman's voice echoed. "See how they forgot me. You'll be forgotten too." Sarah tried to figure out where the voice was coming from, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Terrified, she grabbed the photo and ran to the door. But it wouldn't open. No one else was around. Yet the warmth of the room had vanished, replaced by a cold that seeped into her bones. Suddenly, red liquid began to flow onto the table. It looked like blood. Sarah's scream reverberated throughout the room. "You're not alone here." The bartender's earlier words replayed in her mind. From the corner of the wall, a dark, twisted figure began to emerge. It was vaguely human in shape, but its eyes were empty voids. In a guttural voice, it muttered, "Get me out of here." Sarah wanted to run, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. Then, as if waking from a nightmare, she found herself back in the bar, but it was empty. The photograph was still in her hand, but there was no trace of the room or anything that had happened. Standing in the night's cold air, she glanced back at the bar. Its door was shut once again, with a sign on it that read, "Do not return." Sarah fled from the bar, but the photograph remained in her bag. When she returned home that night, she thought she had escaped everything. But the next morning, as she woke up, she heard the same voice beside her bed. Do you want to be forgotten? It's too late. Sarah jumped out of her bed in fear. The room was dark, the windows were shut, but the voice echoed clearly. Once again, the same sentence, as if coming from the walls. It's too late. Sarah suddenly realized the voice was coming from the edge of her bed. She didn't dare to look, but eventually, she mustered the courage, turned on her phone's flashlight, and pointed it toward the source. There was nothing. But then her phone screen flickered. A strange message appeared. Return. Your story isn't over. The terror grew when she noticed her phone had no signal or connection. But the worst part was the photograph she had kept in her bag. It was now lying on her bed. And this time, there was another face on it. The dark figure. Struggling to breathe, Sarah tried to calm herself. This is just my imagination. Maybe what I saw at the bar wasn't real, she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew everything from that night was real. The bar wasn't just a bar. It was a doorway, a portal to another world. Days passed, but the photograph kept reappearing in different parts of her house. She tried to burn it, but the paper wouldn't catch fire. She threw it in the trash, but the next morning it was back on her kitchen table. Her dreams turned into nightmares. She heard doors creaking open in the middle of the night and whispers coming from the walls. One night, she could no longer bear it. The weight of everything around her was suffocating. She made a decision. She would return to the bar and confront whatever was happening. This time, she would face the fear and find the truth. It was 3 a.m. when Sarah stood outside the bar. This time, the neon sign wasn't even lit. The bar was shrouded in complete darkness, but the door was open. When Sarah stepped inside, the air felt heavier than before. The lights were dim, but there were no customers. Behind the bar, it wasn't the same bartender. In his place was another shadow, a figure with its head bowed, face hidden. How will you save yourself this time? The figure said in a deep metallic voice. Despite our high auror successor. Fear. Sarah stepped closer. Who are you? What are these photos? What do you want from me? She screamed. The shadow slowly lifted its head and Sarah stumbled back at what she saw. The figure's face seemed to be a grotesque amalgamation of countless human faces. Cries and whispers seemed to emanate from its body, as if it were alive. The shadow moved closer. You are now part of this story. You saw us, and once you've seen us, you can never escape. It whispered. The bar's walls suddenly seemed to come alive, oozing blood, as Sarah felt herself being pulled into some kind of portal. The next morning, police searched the bar's ruins and found Sarah's pen and notebook. Her final words read, "Everyone has a secret. Mine ends here." But no trace of Sarah herself was ever found. The legend persisted. Those who visited the Foggy Lantern Bar sometimes never returned. The bar continues to welcome shadows in the dead of night. Sarah woke up in a panic, leaping from her bed. The room was dark, the window shut, yet the voice echoed clearly. Once again, the same words, as if coming from the walls. It's too late. Sarah immediately felt the voice was coming from beside her bed. She didn't dare look, but finally gathered her courage, turned on her phone's flashlight, and turned toward the sound. There was nothing there. But suddenly, her phone vibrated. A strange message appeared on the screen. Return. Your story isn't over. The most terrifying part? Her phone had no signal. Worse still, the photograph she had kept in her bag was now lying on her bed. But the photo had changed. A new face appeared on it. The face of the dark figure she had seen in the bar. Sarah struggled to breathe as she tried to calm herself down. It's just my imagination. Maybe what I saw in the bar wasn't real, she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew everything that had happened was real. The bar wasn't just a bar. It was a doorway to somewhere else. Days passed, but the photograph wouldn't leave her alone. No matter where she hid it, it reappeared in her home. She tried burning it, but it wouldn't ignite. She threw it away. Yet the next morning it was on her kitchen table. Her dreams turned to nightmares. Every night she heard doors creak open and whispers in the walls. One night, unable to take it anymore, Sarah made a decision. She would return to the bar and confront whatever was happening. This time, she would face her fear and uncover the truth. She stood in front of the bar at 3 a.m. The neon sign was dark, and the bar looked completely lifeless. Yet, the door was open. Sarah stepped inside, feeling the heavy, oppressive air hit her immediately. The lights were dim, and unlike before, the bar was completely empty. The bartender wasn't there either. Instead, in his place, stood another shadowy figure. Its head hung low, face hidden. "How will you save yourself this time?" the figure said, in a deep metallic voice. Despite her fear, Sarah stepped closer. "Who are you? What are these photos?" "What do you want from me?" she screamed. The shadow lifted its head for a moment, and Sarah stumbled back in horror. Its face was a twisted amalgamation of countless human faces. Cries and sobs seemed to emanate from its very form. The shadow moved toward her. "You're part of this story now. You've seen us, and no one who sees us can ever escape," it whispered. Suddenly the bar's walls seemed to come alive, oozing blood. Sarah felt herself being pulled toward an unseen doorway. The next morning, police discovered Sarah's pen and notebook among the ruins of the bar. The last words she had written were, "Everyone has a secret. Mine ends here." But no trace of Sarah herself was ever found. The legend of Foggy Lantern persisted. It was said that those who entered sometimes never returned, and the bar still waited in the dead of night, ready to welcome its next visitor. Months later, the disappearance of Sarah Collins became a mystery that captured public attention, though it was quickly dismissed by officials. However, for paranormal enthusiasts and investigators, it raised more questions than answers. One such investigator, Ethan Graves, was a renowned paranormal author. He had written countless books on hauntings, legends, and unexplained phenomena. When he heard about Sarah's disappearance, he knew this was no ordinary case. Even though friends and colleagues warned him to stay away, Ethan decided to investigate the Foggy Lantern Bar himself. At midnight, Ethan arrived at the bar. A cold wind sliced through the air as he stood before the darkened entrance. The neon sign wasn't lit, but the door was ajar. Adjusting his bag, Ethan took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior of the bar was eerily quiet. Dust-covered tables, an old piano, and a faint sense of dread filled the room. Behind the bar stood a figure. Not the bartender Sarah had described, but someone or something else entirely. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, and it stared at Ethan without speaking. Ethan broke the silence. "Sarah Collins, I want to know what happened to her." The figure didn't respond. Instead, it slid an old glass across the counter toward Ethan. The liquid inside was a dark red. It resembled wine, but had an unnatural scent. Ethan hesitated but didn't touch it. "Answer me," Ethan demanded, his voice firm. The figure finally spoke without lifting its head. "She wrote the story, but you will read it." Ethan froze. What did that mean? His instincts told him this was more dangerous than anything he'd encountered before. Then, he heard a slow creaking sound. A door appeared at the back of the bar, a door that hadn't been there before. Grabbing his flashlight, Ethan approached it cautiously. Scratched into the wood were the words, "Those who enter, never leave." The air felt heavier. When Ethan turned to look, the figure behind the bar,